This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Is there a sports podcast in Detroit that people are talking about?
Hey everybody, this is Freddie Cohen of ESPN Radio. When I'm not talking about breaking news or breaking news on ESPN Radio, I'm always a fan and listen to the Detroit Sports Podcast, and so should you.
Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to another recording of the Doc and Jock podcast. 2018 is upon us, and similar to the Detroit Lions, great things happening with the Doc and Jock podcast. Always enjoy the support. Thank you, everybody, for finding us, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. We're kicking off our first podcast of 2018. Adam, my friend, great job. WDFN, you filled in. You gave me the call. You said, look, I need you, man. We rolled up.
I said I might need you.
You said I might need you. I knew right away. I'm like, I'm going to be up there right away. So I dropped everything. Last Friday, we got a chance to fill in.
I was like, what are you doing? And you're like, I'm watching like 9 kids right now. They're all running around. I've got one kid beating another kid with a stick. It's crazy. And you're just sitting there. You got to be the worst dad in the world. You're just sitting there tweeting me back and forth, texting me. And I was like, I might need you. What are you doing? You came through, dude.
We will recap what we did at WDFN real quick here, but I just want to let you know afterwards, I was amped. I mean, I really felt good till like 9, 10 o'clock after what we did. It was fun. We got a chance to talk about the Lions, Jim Caldwell, the bowl games, Jim Harbaugh, Michigan State. We talked about the Pistons. The experience at WDFN was really unbelievable. It was a dream come true, being that you and I both love sports radio. You captained the ship flawlessly. I mean, obviously, there are some things that I sent you in terms of critiques, but in the end, I mean, when Tyler said it, I really took it and I really respected it. And he said, look, for the first time doing it, you know, manning the ship, you did an amazing job. All the feedback was great. And every time the caller said, you know, you guys are in the sports business, you guys did a great job. It was really amazing. It was a fun time to captain the ship. And just for the first time, for myself, being in a live sports radio talk show, having you there captaining it was perfect. I like being the number 2. And I got to chime in here and there, and I got to see you kind of man the ship and go back and forth. And you, like you said, you didn't crap the bed, and we got through it, and WDFN still has their license, and potentially we could do it maybe again in the future. That's all you can ask for.
Yeah, a couple of things. First off, I want to thank you because on a whim, I sat there, sent you a text message, I called you, and like you said, you dropped everything. You dropped like all 9 of those kids that you were babysitting and watching, and you said, I got to go. And you showed up, and you did a great job. You sat there, you helped me show prep. We've only had like an hour to show prep the show, too, which is unbelievable. Most people get either a whole day or they get a couple hours. We had basically an hour to put together a 3-hour show. You assisted. Jason helped out. So it was awesome. Everybody kind of came together and pulled together, and it worked out extremely well.
What was it like for you being in the chair kind of just beforehand and then as the 3 hours progressed? Because the instruction was given, Adam, you run the show, and everybody else just help Adam contribute and do the thing. But what was it like being in your chair because you're the host of the show?
I was really nervous. So naturally, I'm a better number 2, I think. I don't think I'm cut out maybe to be a number 1. Maybe I am.
This is bad.
I don't know. Yeah, it could have been bad. But I'm more comfortable as a number 2. Like with our podcast, you sit in the first chair and I sit in the number 2, and it's a totally different set of skills, right? I've got to be able to go off of anything you say. You can go in any direction. I've got to be able to bounce off of whatever direction you're going in. When you're in the first chair, you kind of got to lay the tracks down, and you've got to let everybody else feed off of you. So it's a little bit different. I thought I did a good job. There's definitely things I need to tighten up on and things that could have been a lot better. And again, they'll come with practice, and I say thank you to you because over the course of doing this podcast, there have been opportunities that, whether it be with our show, whether it be with our wrestling podcast, where you have given me the opportunity and you basically have given me control and you say, you run with this. And it's been a good amount of practice, a good little bit of trying to get some form and try to figure things out. So I appreciate that, and I want to thank you for all of that. I was nervous. And I think once we got through that first segment, my goal was to get through that first segment. If we can get through that first segment, I knew we were going to be okay. We got through the first segment. It was good. And I think once we settled into that second segment, we were rocking and rolling, and everything felt like just like putting on your favorite hoodie. It was comfortable, you felt good, and you were ready to go. So it was a good time. I really enjoyed it.
And I like the intimate nature of the studio because, we're not that far apart. We weren't sitting on the opposite side of each other. We're right there talking to each other about sports, and it flowed naturally. I think you included me and Tyler just the right amount of times, and it was a very fun experience all the way through. It went by so fast, and like I said, I've only listened to it once, so maybe the rest of this week I'll probably get a chance to listen to it one more time. But I really, like I said, when I played it back, and I guess the best compliment you could get was my wife texted you right away and said, wow, it sounded great. Everybody that listened really said, look, you guys sound like you know what you're doing. You're not total hacks. And so that's the feeling I got was, you know what? When people say, how did you go do that? It's simple. We've spent almost 300 hours podcasting and talking and debating and discussing sports radio, discussing podcasting. So in the end, it was just really a 3-hour version of our podcast, just going back and forth, having a good time. And that's what made it fun for me because I wasn't nervous, really, to be honest with you, because when you gave me the instructions, I said, oh, this is perfect. I can chime in when I want. You're going to take the lead. You got all the hard work. I just get to chime in and bounce off of what you're saying. And so it made it fun for me. And so that's what I love because all the pressure was on you and you delivered. And it was fun. It was surreal. The best part was getting a copy of it so that everyone can have proof that we were there. And like I said, like I said afterwards, from the basement of our house to hosting a live sports talk radio show in Detroit, it was awesome, and hopefully we get a chance to do it again. And like I said, your future's bright if you stay with this business, and you got the opportunity to do it. And like I said, you got to do it. The more reps you get live, the better off it'll be. And so it was fun. And like I said, with live radio, with podcasting, you just stick your face in front of the microphone and start talking. And that's what we did. And so we have the opportunity to continue to do this. And just like our podcast taking the next step, the Detroit Lions, baby, I got renewed hope after New Year's Day, 7:45.
Right. Hold on one second. Before we get into the Lions, real quick, all right? I want to say thank you to Tyler, because Tyler was our producer.
Extraordinaire.
He was the guy who was basically doing a ton of grunt work and a lot of the heavy lifting. So thank you, Tyler. Tyler listens to the podcast now and again. Tyler won one of our it was the basketball, the tournament. I think our very first one he won. So thank you, Tyler, for everything. Again, thank you. What else? I had something else I wanted to tell you. I don't remember what it was.
Thank Casey for giving us the chance.
Yeah, thank you, Casey, for giving us the chance. This is for you.
Money, baby. You're giving me money?
There you go. That's your third place finish in our fantasy football league. So congratulations.
Yes.
You got your buy-in back.
I beat the number 1 seed in the third place game, and in the other free league I was in, I finished in third place. So for the doc, 2 fantasy leagues, I finished in third place in both. Joy. And made $25. Made my money back. Woohoo!
So congratulations there.
Yay for me.
And so I was just happy I didn't swear on air. That was my big, like, once we were done and everything was said and done and we shut the mics off and it was like 6:05, I looked at you and I looked at Tyler and I was like, man, I'm just happy I didn't swear. Because I cuss like a sailor. And sometimes you put a microphone in front of me and you just don't know what's going to come out. And I was just so happy I made it 3 hours without swearing. My mom must have been so happy and proud of me.
That's what our fist bump was. It wasn't like good show. It was like, yes, we made it 3 hours without swearing. This is great.
It was awesome. No FCC rules were broken. All right, yes. Now back to a Happy New Year. The Lions.
A
Take
new
it away,
day,
bro.
baby. It's a new day. Bob Quinn didn't even waste any time. They released a statement 7:45. I felt it was a little bit cold in that.
I thought it was awesome.
It is cold, though. Jim Caldwell has a tight relationship with the players. You saw what happened in Chicago. John Fox was able to kind of address his team before he got axed. Jim Caldwell, nope, 7:45, got the call, and he was relieved of his duties, didn't go into the locker room. He had to release his statement on his own. Bob Quinn eloquently spoke for 20 minutes on Monday, 2 o'clock. He came out and said, look, this is the future direction of the program. Winning 9 games a year is not good enough. We got to kind of take the next step here and get playoff wins and get Super Bowl wins and try our absolute best to take the next step. And so Bob Quinn, like I said, he gave me renewed confidence that this Lions organization takes it seriously. They're not going to rest on their laurels. They're going to go out there and bring forth a coach that they believe will take the Lions to the next step. And so for me, like I told you at WDFN, I think Jim Caldwell deserves credit for actually executing the plan as a stopgap coach, getting the Lions from a team that couldn't make the postseason, that couldn't win 6 to 10 games consistently, to a team that 2 out of 4 years made the postseason. He's the winningest coach in the Super Bowl era. And you say to yourself, okay, Jim, thank you for the service that you did for the Detroit Lions. You were a guy that took the organization when they were struggling under Jim Schwartz and having a bunch of off-the-field issues and nonsense. I mean, we joked around. I think Nick Fairley got in trouble twice in the same day for the same thing. And we said, oh, boy, sometimes, these players are kind of making the organization look bad. But they did the job. Bob Quinn now has the crosshairs on him. He has to go out there and find the coach because he fired a coach that some people viewed as successful. And now his job is to go out there, find the coach that's not only going to come in here and continue the progress of Caldwell, but more than one playoff win. Maybe even, hey, can we dream it? An NFC title game. Maybe even get the Detroit Lions into the Super Bowl. He's got a tough job, but I think he's the man to do it.
I feel really comfortable with Bob Quinn at the helm.
Yes.
And I think the one thing you can say about Bob Quinn is he's not playing around. There is no way you can go backwards from here, right? You just fired a coach who was 9-7, who had a winning record all but 1 year that he was here and got you to the playoffs twice and just missed out. And you know what? It's not good enough.
You're kind of looking for more of that pass back and forth kind of thing.
And that's what got you fired. That right there is what got you fired, Caldwell. Bob Quinn has come in and he has raised the bar. The bar before was set like, hey, let's just be competitive in December. Do you remember when we first started doing this podcast? Let's just be competitive in the month of December. And then it got to a point where, hey, let's make it to the playoffs. And then it's like, hey, we need to win a playoff game. Well, we're talking about championships here. And you know what? Bob Quinn gets it. Bob Quinn understands where we're at. And Bob Quinn knows what we have to do to take that next step. And it's not with Jim Caldwell. And I appreciate everything Jim Caldwell did. You're absolutely right. You said it best. He did his job. He was a stopgap coach. He came in. He took you from what Jim Schwartz left you with, right? And I think Jim Schwartz now is a better coach because of his experience here. So if you see him get a head coaching job somewhere else, don't be surprised that he does a much better job.
It would be the first time a former Lion that held the job of head coach gets another job in the NFL. If Jim Schwartz, if the rumors are true, if he's the coach of the Giants.
That's crazy. But that's reality. It's what it is. He ends up taking just basically clay, and it's like clay that's covered in muck and dirt and grime, and he cleans it all up, and then he starts to kind of shape it, and he starts to kind of build it. And now you've got a solid footing for this organization to go forward. Do you remember players like Titus Young? You remember how crazy he was? Like, that guy sat there, broke into a store, fell asleep on a mattress that he broke into, and just all kinds of different things. Like, those were the guys you had hanging around here. You brought up Nick Fairley. Nick Fairley got in trouble for eating pot, not smoking it, eating it. What kind of knuckleheads do you have in this locker room? And Jim Caldwell got rid of all those guys, blew them all out. Said, no, we don't need those guys here. We don't want that. We want actual men who know what the hell's going on. So I think Jim Caldwell for that. I think in the end, what got Jim Caldwell fired was his game day situational coaching. The guy would have 9 guys on the field. He wouldn't challenge plays that were obviously needed to be challenged. He would sit there and allow a run play on 2nd and 15. Losing to Baltimore and then losing to Cincinnati, I think at that point, it was done. You weren't going anywhere else with this guy, And I think at that time, Bob Quinn had already made up his mind. He was like, we're going in a different direction. There's a guy out there that I want. There's a guy that he's targeting. There's somebody out there. Well, all these coaches that are coming in, and it might be Matt Patricia. It might be. It might be Mike Vrabel. Thank God I got that one right. Oh, man, you know how hard it is to say Vrabel with a missing tooth? Good God, it's brutal. Anyways, it might be him. You don't know, all right? But there is a guy out there that Bob Quinn has in mind and Bob Quinn wants. Or when I woke up on New Year's morning and I went to my phone and I seen Lions have released head coach Jim Caldwell, I was so excited. I was so excited. And I wasn't excited because Caldwell got released and he's a bad guy and he needs to go. No, I was excited because it let me know that we have a general manager here who will not tolerate mediocrity. He wants more. For the first time in my 34 years of living and being a Detroit Lions fan, we now have a general manager who gets it, who understands what it takes to win and will do whatever it takes to get us to that point where we can compete for a championship. And that's what you want to see. If you're a Lions fan, that's what you want to see.
I feel bad being excited that Jim Caldwell's gone, but when you have a new situation, there's renewed hope, and you really look at it and you say, well, Bob Quinn now is kind of looking at coaches from the defensive side of the ball. And were you surprised at all that Matt Stafford kind of came out, when they were in the locker room and said, I like working with Jim Bob Cooter. I kind of hope that I've been successful. I kind of hope that our relationship can continue, because it kind of puts pressure on the new coach to kind of keep Jim Bob Cooter, maybe to keep Stafford happy. And when you look at it, you go, well, Jim Bob Cooter kind of ran an offense that didn't have a running game, and it didn't get fixed. And so a lot of people don't think that the problem lies solely with Amir Abdullah. They think that the problem lied with the scheme, and that, the offensive line coach along with Jim Bob Cooter were a big problem in the reason why the Lions did not have a 100-yard running game for the better part of 2 seasons. And Jim Caldwell didn't have a 100-yard running back in 4 years as coach. He never saw a running back have 100 yards. So it's fascinating in that, will the new coach, if it's Patricia, Vrabel, if it's somebody else, they're interviewing the likes of Pat Shurmur, Steve Wilkes. They're interviewing coordinators and things like that. But in the end, I truly believe that it's going to be, when the time comes and they announce who the new coach is going to be, it's going to be current defensive coordinator of the Patriots, Matt Patricia.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was him. It wouldn't blow my mind. I don't know if that's the guy that would blow my doors off either. Matt Patricia does a lot of things really good, and by all accounts, he is a football mind. He seems to get it. He understands it. He's a very smart guy. He ends up taking on a lot that Bill Belichick gives him. It works out, I guess. I don't think I'll be upset with that pick. I don't know if, that's not the guy who's at the very, very tippy top of my list. Of all the people that are out there, whether it be Matt Patricia, Pat Shurmur, Mike Vrabel, Steve Wilkes, the guy who I really want them to go out and get and target, and I don't even know if he's going to be available, because you're going to have to work something out, and he might end up becoming available as the offseason kind of rolls along here, but it's John Harbaugh. If John Harbaugh becomes available, I want him. I feel like out of all the Harbaughs, he's the one who gets it the most, and he knows how to coach the best. I'm just saying, and we'll tackle Jim and Jim's issues later on.
The way that the Ravens so eloquently left the season doesn't leave a bad taste in your mouth. I mean, they had a chance to play Cincinnati, and they gave up a late touchdown. You think that John Harbaugh, in terms of what he's done with Baltimore after the Super Bowl win, kind of has his stock high? I kind of think his stock has kind of plateaued in the last couple of seasons.
I think John Harbaugh is a guy you could bring here, and you could basically breathe new life into him. You've seen him do things with. I mean, where would you put Joe Flacco as far as quarterbacks?
8 to 12, basically.
8 to 12?
Yeah,
he's a top,
game manager.
He's a top 12 quarterback?
Basically, yeah. I think he's a game manager. So
where do you put Matt Stafford then?
I put Stafford logistically probably top 10. 4 or 5. I mean, he's a top 10 quarterback by all accounts with that offense and that horrid offensive line. He had top 10 numbers all across the board. So you have to give him that respect, but he's not elite. And there's only 3 quarterbacks that are really elite. So I would slot him in that second tier, like 4 through 10.
I would argue with you. Matt Stafford's probably a top 7 quarterback. Joe Flacco, on the other hand, I think is somewhere near
the bottom.
Yeah, he's in between 15 and 20 for me.
Okay.
He's not a very good quarterback, but he's not a horrible quarterback. He's a guy who you can put out there, and he will give you the opportunity to possibly win a game. But don't be surprised if he throws a late interception that totally crushes your season. All right, and that's where I believe Joe Flacco is. So he's able to sit there and win a Super Bowl with that guy. On top of that, you look at what he did this season with his 5th-string running back. I mean, Alex Collins is now a name. Going into the year, you're like, Alex who? What? And now he was able to sit there and get a guy who is a 5th-string running back and turn him into something. So I think John Harbaugh has the ability to coach guys up and take what he's given.
Are you optimistic that in 2018, because when you look at that schedule, it is brutal. It's tough that a lot of fans are like, look, you bring in a guy, Bob Quinn, the pressure's on for you to win in 2018, no matter what, because Jim Caldwell won. And so I do believe there's a chance that the Lions will take a step back in 2018, maybe get to the 6-7 win mark, because that schedule is brutal. But in an effort to try and get to the playoffs and the Super Bowl, I'm kind of curious to see what the timetable is going to be for the new coach, because the pressure is probably going to be on because of the fact that we saw winning football with Jim Caldwell. He had basically an average record of 9-7 throughout his tenure.
I think Bob Quinn's already laid it down. Going into this, you've got to win immediately. You just fired a winning head coach. You fired a guy who sat there and had a 9-7 season and missed the playoffs. So going forward, you need to win. It's all about making the playoffs that first year. Whoever that head coach is, it's all about getting to the playoffs.
Do you like the notion that it kind of seems to be going on now with general managers, in that if your previous coach was an offensive guy, then the next coach is a defensive guy? Because by all accounts, the next coach of the Bears is probably going to be Josh McDaniels, because they had John Fox, and now they're going to go towards the offense, whereas the Lions had an offensive guy in Jim Caldwell, and so you see a lot of the names that come up early being defensive guys. You okay with that, with this team?
It doesn't bother me. At some point, I think it'd be good for some consistency, because it's something I've been going back and forth about with myself. Just inner monologues with myself. It's Adam talking to Adam here. And if you were sitting in a room with me when we were on a couch, you'd be like, you're absolutely crazy, because I keep going back and forth with this inner monologue of, do I want an offensive guy? Do I want a defensive guy? What do I want? How do I think this is going to work? And look, Jim Caldwell was an offensive mind, right? So the unit that you have that is probably most close to being an elite unit in the NFL is your offense at this time. So do I want an offensive head coach to come in and take this over and help take it to the next level, kind of build upon what we already have? We've got a franchise quarterback, right? You got a stud left tackle. The rest of the line, there's some question marks. We're not really sure what we got going on there. You've got a decent wide receiver core. You need some running back help, because our running backs are absolutely atrocious, right? You bring in a guy who can really help flesh that out and build that up and really take it to that next level? Or do you sit there and do you bring in a defensive guy who can, I don't know, maybe help coach up the linebackers who forever, we've needed linebacking help since Chris Spielman left. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, do you go get somebody who can sit there and knows the ins and outs of what the linebackers have to do and what the defensive line has to do? Do you go get a guy like that who can really help that secondary? Because that's what we've got. We've got a really good secondary here for defense. That front seven is atrocious most of the time, especially with Haloti Ngata being out. So what do we want? What's going to help out? That's why I lean towards John Harbaugh. He's a special teams coach. He was special teams. You bring him in, he's special, bro. He is special. And not special like where he needs a helmet with a drool guard and he's licking windows. No. I don't mean special like that. I mean like he was the special teams coach who got promoted to head coach, and they seen something in this guy. Next thing you know, he won a damn Super Bowl. I don't know. I don't know if it's good to sit there and have that fluctuation where you go offense for 4 years, then you go defense for a couple years, and then you go back to offense. I don't know if that's necessarily good. I think in the end, what's going to happen is whoever the next head coach is going to have to see eye to eye with Bob Quinn. They're going to have the same idea. They're going to have to sit there and target the same issues with this team. Whether it be, hey, the offensive line was really bad this year. It was really shaky. We need to address that. Yeah, Amir Abdullah is a running back who can sit there and help you out. I believe on this team right now, you've got a running back who can get you 100 yards in a game, or you got a 1,000-yard rusher for a season. Yeah, I believe we've got that. Let's address this. Or it's going to be a head coach who says, hey, look, we really need to beef up that defensive line, and we need some more linebacking help. And you always need secondary help, so let's go out and let's address that. They've got to be of the same like mind, and I think that's going to be the guy who's going to help propel this organization forward. I think the problem with the Lions over the course of history is they've kind of got into that. Well, like you said, like Jim Caldwell, do we have the drop the back, the more of that back and forth type thing? Do we have this?
You're kind of looking for more of that pass back and forth kind of thing.
Yes, a lot of that, the whole back and forth type of thing. So you go offense one time, then you go defense, offense, defense. You bring in a player's coach, and then you bring in a guy who's a total hard ass. It's too much back and forth. At some point, your organization needs some consistency. You get a head coach in here who's of the same like mind as your general manager. I think this is going to help propel this organization forward light years ahead, and I think Bob Quinn gets it. I think the issue that we've had as Lions fans and the Lions as an organization is they've always kind of gone the easy way, right? Oh, let's go get this guy because he's a hot name, or because the Fords like him, or hey, let's stick with this guy because he's already in our system and he knows what we've got going on, so we don't have to sit there and flip the tables over and throw everything off the table and then pick it all back up and reorganize it. Let's go with the easy way out. Bob Quinn's going to do things the right way, and whether that be Matt Patricia, Pat Shurmur, Steve Wilkes, or John Harbaugh if he becomes available, whoever it is, I believe he's going to do it the right way.
Real quick, looking at Matt Patricia's bio, he's been a staff member at New England since 2004. He's been the safeties coach, the linebackers coach, and an offensive assistant, and he's got that defense playing well, rebounded well after a disastrous start. And you look at some of the other names, the biggest knock against Mike Vrabel is inexperience. He's only been the defensive coordinator for one season, and when you look at the numbers, the Texans are last in points allowed and 23rd in yards given up. But obviously, the injury to Watt played a huge part in their season. But Mike Vrabel, I think he's ready in about 2 or 3 seasons. I don't think he's ready just yet to take this job right now. So that's why I believe that Matt Patricia is the front runner. I do believe that he has a solid working relationship, and by all accounts, he's a genius. Many people believe that he is the next guy on the defensive side to maybe be that genius. similar to McVay on the offensive side. And that's all you can do is hope, because what did we say at DFN? We said it's going to take a miracle in order to raise the Detroit Lions from the ashes. Only one playoff win since 1991. And you just look at it and you go, dude, 5-6 decades and you don't get a playoff win. It's just a really tough situation.
Before we step out and we go to a special guest that we're going to have online here, Matt Patricia, the way that defense operates, they're heavily invested in their secondary. What do we have in Detroit that's really, really good? Secondary. So it would make sense if it's Matt Patricia, because you've got the pieces here for the secondary that can really translate on the field. So he can sit there and kind of bring that defensive prowess and maybe make it work here in Detroit.
We have Chris Burke coming up next. You can follow him on Twitter at Chris Burke NFL. He's with The Athletic. He covered the Detroit Lions this entire season, and we're going to pick his brain regarding the coaching search and kind of reflect on the former head coach, Jim Caldwell. We'll have Chris Burke next. You're listening to Doc and Jock on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Doc and Jock here for our host site, Podomatic.com. When Adam and I first started this project, we were looking for a great place to host all of our recorded audio, and thank goodness we found Podomatic.com. We record 7 to 8 weekly podcasts, and we only use one host site. If you're going to start a brand new project, if you want to do a new podcast in 2018, Doc and Jock, Vito, Jason, Jerry, Steve Dace, all of the hosts here on the network, we're going to recommend one host site, Podomatic.com. Joining us now, Chris Burke. You can follow him on Twitter at Chris Burke NFL. He spent this season covering the Detroit Lions for The Athletic. If you want great coverage, you want to check out this great website, and you want to get a discount, go to theathletic.com/DSP. Chris, Happy New Year. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, same to you. Thanks for having me.
Interesting time covering the Detroit Lions this season. News was made New Year's Day. Bob Quinn makes a decision. He lets go of Jim Caldwell. What was your take on the news that Jim Caldwell is no longer going to be here coaching the Detroit Lions?
Yeah, I don't think it was any big surprise. I mean, it felt like it was the Lions really needed to finish the season, that last stretch 4-0, maybe even get into the playoffs for Caldwell to really have a shot to stick around. I sort of wavered a little bit just being around the team the week leading up to week 17 and then after that game, week 17, because all the players were just so adamant that they liked having Caldwell around, talked about how much they respected him and how good he'd been for the organization. So there was a little part of me that hesitated a bit, but I think as soon as Bob Quinn took the job, he kind of knew that Jim Caldwell was going to have to really perform for Quinn to not want to go make his own hire. And so it was kind of inevitable that it got to this point unless the Lions really took off.
Hey, Chris, Adam Straczynski here. How would you summarize Jim Caldwell's time as Detroit Lions head coach?
You know, that's going to be a tough thing to figure out for a lot of people, I think. I mean, I think you've got to give him credit for what he did, and which is to make the team more consistently competitive. I mean, they went to the playoffs twice. They were a couple inches against Atlanta for maybe getting in this year. And compared to what was there before Jim Caldwell arrived, I mean, again, you've got to give him credit for being able to take this team from the level they were at to the level it's currently at now. I think it was fair to question if he was the guy to get them to that next level, and that jump's usually the toughest one, to go from sort of middle of the pack, from playoff contention to Super Bowl contention. I don't know that there was any evidence that he was the guy to do that, but I think you kind of tip your cap for what he accomplished on the field and certainly what he accomplished off the field. I mean, there you won't find many people, if any, who would bash Jim Caldwell's presence, just sort of how he handled the locker room. I think everyone just really, really respected him from the top down in that organization. So, you can't take that away from him. I think you have to give him the credit for what he did as the coach here. But at the same time, I think it's fair to point out how poorly they did against the really good teams. And that's why Bob Quinn's, looking for someone else now.
Kind of building off of all of that, do you see him possibly landing somewhere else? I know a couple weeks ago, John and I were discussing it, and John felt Jim Caldwell would be a ideal fit for what's going on in Cleveland right now. So do you see him maybe latching on with a team that's almost like the Lions were in a spot 4 years ago where you're just trying to kind of redefine yourself and kind of rebuild your team and kind of brush it off and kind of build it and kind of take that next step forward? Do you see him latching on with, I don't know, it could be a team maybe like the Titans? You know, they have a decent squad, but they're kind of in that mix right there where they're just, you know, they're not great. They're not that good. Do you think maybe he could go someplace even like a Cleveland?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be tough for him to find another head coaching job. Usually if you get through two in the NFL and you haven't produced great results, it's hard to find that third one, especially for a guy like Caldwell, who now is turning 63 later this month. You know, there wouldn't be a whole lot of long-term future in bringing him in to an organization. So I think it'll be difficult for him to find a job. And you kind of hit on one of the reasons why I think it'll be tough. I think if he were going, I don't know that he's necessarily the guy you'd take, even for a Tennessee who's, you know, it was playoff team or playoff contention. I don't know that he's that guy necessarily to push them over the top. That was the problem in Detroit. So you'd really be looking at some of those teams that are trying to get from some really tough times into a better situation. And Cleveland, it seems like, is going to keep Hugh Jackson. I cannot imagine Indianapolis would bring him back there. So you kind of check off some of the spots where he would make sense. And there's not a whole lot left. So I think, you know, you're kind of talking maybe he lands back somewhere as an assistant head coach or as an offensive coordinator again. I think that's possible. I also thought it was possible that the Lions would try to retain him in the front office somewhere, just transition him up because he is so highly thought of. But you know, that's a tough thing to do too when you're trying to bring someone in. You don't necessarily want the old coach kind of hanging over everything, but I think he can find a spot to coach somewhere. I just don't know that it'll be a head coaching job.
Right now, Bob Quinn's job is to go out there, survey the landscape, and by all accounts, he's interviewing people this week. You know he's going to do his due diligence. What should the Lions be looking for in the next man to take the job?
Well, I think it'll be interesting. A lot of the names that have come out so far are all on the defensive side of the ball, and that's sort of how it has gone in the NFL on a regular basis. You know, you kind of go 180 from what you had before. So you had a really veteran offensive-minded head coach in Caldwell, so now you kind of swing back the other way, and a lot of the names you're hearing are younger defensive-minded guys. And I don't necessarily know that you need to make that swing, but it seems early on that that's sort of the way Bob Quinn's trending. I mean, I think you need someone that, you know, you don't necessarily need a fiery coach. You don't necessarily need a guy who's going to be great in press conferences and really visible and everything. But I think maybe this team and this franchise could use a little bit more of kind of a kick in the butt. I think I don't want to say they got complacent or too comfortable with Jim Caldwell, but certainly his demeanor was very level. And that was, I think the players like that, you know, they never got too high, never got too low. But I also think that made it kind of easy to fall into their old patterns. So maybe someone who brings a little more juice to that position. And like I said, I think right now you're seeing a lot of defensive-minded names come up. And part of that is because I think that they might want to keep Jim Bob Cooter around, and you can't really do that if you hire, say, Josh McDaniels. Now,
you penned a great article for theathletic.com. Who are the leading candidates at this time? I know that you had kind of broke down who you thought that the Lions were going to interview and who were likely strong candidates.
Yeah, I mean, I think Matt Patricia is kind of the obvious one. And again, you know, defensive-minded, really smart, comes from that Patriots coaching tree, which I think is a discussion in itself, whether you trust that coaching tree or not. But obviously, Bob Quinn has a relationship with him, knows what he's about, knows what he would bring to the table for the most part. I think it's interesting. We haven't heard a lot yet about Josh McDaniels. I think at least, again, it's early in the process. Like you said, I think they'll take their time, and Bob Quinn said this will be thorough, but seems like the favored option out of New England right now is Patricia and not McDaniels. So I think you put him right at the top of the list. And Mike Vrabel is probably the other one. Those would probably be the top two for me, Patricia and Vrabel. And again, Vrabel is kind of interesting because, you know, he had 1 year as a defensive coordinator in Houston, and they weren't very good. You know, J.J. Watt was out all year, but that defense was pretty poor for most of the season. So how does that all translate over? You'd be trying to do with him sort of what, you know, almost to an extent what has happened with a guy like Sean McVay or some of these younger coaches, trying to catch a guy before they really take off as a coordinator and see if you can translate everything into a head coaching job. So those are the two, but certainly there are other names in the mix, and maybe even Terrell Austin gets a legitimate shot at this. I know he already interviewed, so we'll see. I don't think it's going to be quick, and especially if you're talking about the Patriots guys, you know, you could be waiting a month longer to hire someone.
What do you think really separates those guys from the rest of the candidates that are in that mix?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know how much they're going to prioritize experience. Bob Quinn said it would help, but it wasn't necessarily going to be something that they need. We saw Josh McDaniels kind of falter. I mean, I think you're looking at kind of where they're coming from, what their experience has been, age, personality. I mean, I think you're really, again, talking about personality and just someone who is different from what they had in a very stoic Jim Caldwell. Vrabel's a guy who has a reputation for he can get going pretty well in the locker room, and he isn't afraid to kind of stand up to in his role now. He hasn't been afraid to kind of butt heads with Bill O'Brien and the staff there if he thinks he needs it. And I say that in a positive way. I don't think he's someone who flies off the handle, but I think he is respected for voicing his opinions, and players certainly respect him, and a little bit more of a fiery personality. And Patricia, there's certainly a benefit in having that past experience with Bob Quinn. And, when you're going through these searches, it's tough to kind of pick guys out from other organizations that you don't know really at all. And so Quinn was with him for a long time, knows him. I think Patricia's worked his way up. He's a guy that if he doesn't get the Detroit job, you expect him to land somewhere this offseason, because I think it's time for him to branch out and get on his own. Really smart, and again, on that defensive side of the ball. So I don't know that Bob Quinn will go away from someone he really knows at least a little bit, and so that gives Patricia a leg up, I think.
On the phone with us right now is Chris Burke. You can follow him on Twitter at Chris Burke NFL. You can also read some of his great articles on theathletic.com. Now I'm gonna kind of stick you on the hot seat right here, real quick. If you had to pick somebody, who do you think is going to get the job, and who would be somebody who would be in close contention for this position? Maybe not even a Mike Vrabel, maybe somebody else like a Pat Shurmur or somebody.
It's still pretty early, but I think at the moment if I were betting, I would bet on Matt Patricia, and Vrabel's probably a close second to that. So those are really, as I said, those are really the top two. And I think that I don't want to say that they'll do whatever they need to get Patricia, but I think Bob Quinn's going into this trying to target him to some extent, and see if, I think he's going to have some options on the table. And I think Vrabel will too, but I think Patricia might be the most hotly sought after candidate of anyone. So it's not going to be easy necessarily to pull him in. If you're looking, I think you kind of look at those Vikings coordinators. They're already trying to set up an interview with Pat Shurmur, the offensive coordinator there, has the past experience in Cleveland as a head coach. I don't know whether you hold that against him or use it as a benefit that he has that experience. It's hard to really figure out exactly how, the Cleveland, just being in Cleveland works to a guy's benefit or detriment. And George Edwards is the defensive coordinator there, and someone who's been kind of up for jobs in the past. So I think you kind of look there to those two. I don't know if those are necessarily surprises, but a little bit more off the beaten path at the moment than Patricia or Vrabel. So those are kind of the names at the top of the list. I mean, I think the thing that you kind of sit back and wait on a little bit now is to see if Houston decides to go a different way with Bill O'Brien, or if Baltimore decides to go a different way with John Harbaugh, because I think if either of those two came open, the Lions certainly would give them a call.
So the season has shaken out. The Detroit Lions finished 9-7, which puts them square at number 20 in the draft. Many of us, we always look to, when we're watching the Lions, okay, let's look to the draft. Many people call it the Lions Super Bowl. Early on, what do you think should be the top priority for the Lions going into the 2018 NFL draft?
Well, I think that first round is going to set up pretty nicely for them to get some help for the defensive line, and certainly that's an area they need to address, both at defensive end, whether or not Ziggy Ansah's around next year, and defensive tackle. I think they need to get tougher against the run and find someone who can penetrate a little bit from that tackle spot and create a bit of an inside pass rush. So I think they'll be in good shape there, just based on, thinking that you're probably going to see a run of quarterback somewhere. I think we'll see a run of offensive tackle somewhere in the first round. So if you're looking for help in that front four on defense, should be a good spot. I mean, running back's the other one. It's a really good, deep running back class. I kind of have the feeling that fans and everyone outside the Lions organization thinks running back is more of a priority than those inside the organization do. I still think they like what they have at running back and don't necessarily want to commit heavy resources to that spot because of the talent they have on board. But those are really the two, I think, that jump out if you're looking at it, 4 months before the draft here, the defensive front and then the running back position.
Chris, I want to get your opinion on this. And again, feel free to speak freely as you want here. What is your take on Amir Abdullah? Because I think he's a dumpster fire. I hated the pick. I hated the pick the moment they made it. And it's basically, I've been proven right almost every single Sunday that he plays.
I wrote, I think it was ahead of the Green Bay game, the road Green Bay game, that they needed to give him a real shot to be their number one guy, just because I don't know that they have a guy really on the roster. Theo Riddick is someone who's been okay when he's been kind of pushed into that number one role, but certainly is more of a guy you want to be using, moving him around, using him in the passing game. I think he's that complementary piece. Tion Green showed some things in spurts. I don't know that he's a guy you'd build a run game around. So I thought they needed to give Abdullah a really long look. Then he fumbled twice in that Green Bay game. He sort of trended the other way where they cut him out of the game plan. So I think he's an okay back. I don't think he's a great running back. I mean, I think he's, as people have said all along, he's kind of similar to Theo Riddick. Maybe he's probably a better runner, but less explosive as an all-around player than Theo Riddick. So that doesn't leave you in too good of a spot as your number one back. I definitely would not be surprised if they bail on him this offseason. It wouldn't hurt him a whole lot in the cap. They'd still have, in theory, Riddick and Green, and maybe they hang on to Zach Zenner as a restricted free agent. Maybe they bring someone like that back. But I do think they will be looking for someone else to fill that number one role. I think best case scenario for Abdullah in Detroit is that he's back on the roster heading into training camp and kind of fighting for that number 2, number 3 role. But I think we've seen, at least in Detroit, I don't think he's going to take off as the lead back. Maybe somewhere else, maybe a fresh start, different scheme. He's a little more productive, but we haven't seen it at all.
Adam and I have been enjoying the conversation with Chris Burke from The Athletic. Obviously, a lot of people are interested and curious about The Athletic. What's it been like writing for them as opposed to the time you spent working at Sports Illustrated?
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been a lot different. And I was covering the entire league at Sports Illustrated and now covering just the Lions. So it took a few weeks to kind of get my footing and everything. But I think it's fun, and hopefully that the content's been what people who have subscribed are looking for, because I think we are able to go a little bit more in depth and take a longer form look at things than maybe some of the other sites out there. So like I said, I hope that content's showing. I hope people have liked what they've seen so far. But it's been a good experience. I think I appreciate that the readers have responded really well, and it seems like they've gotten some good interaction on what I've written and on Twitter and everything. It's obviously, I'm from Michigan, grew up here. It's obviously a great sports town, and the Lions are sort of the team you want to be covering, I think, if you're going to be covering a team in Detroit. So far, so good on my end.
Do they tell you how many awesomes you get rated off your articles? Because that's what I usually rate you guys, rate your articles. I've rated at least 5 of them awesome.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I actually do keep track. There's a formula that's more complicated than you would think, depending on how many people click each one of those smiley face, frowny face ratings at the bottom of articles. But it is something they keep track of, and it has helped a little bit, especially this first year. I started right before week 2 of the season, so kind of jumped in cold and didn't get the training camp experience or anything. So we were kind of figuring out as the season went along what the readers liked and what they didn't like, and so that rating system helps, and hopefully it'll make everything that much better once the 2018 season rolls around.
Chris, do you find that people like more critical analysis with your articles, or do they like more of the feature articles that you guys put up?
I think people do enjoy the feature articles. I think I've gotten more consistent positive response on sort of the analytical stuff and diving in, well, not just myself, but we have Pro Football Focus, and Scott Bischoff has done some film work for us. I think people really like diving in that, and especially when the Lions win, I think it's hard to enjoy it too much for the fan base when they lose and you're taking a kind of analytical look at things. But I do think that the readers have enjoyed that so far, and I think it's a good sign for us from the Athletics perspective for the off season too, because we're not necessarily chasing rumors and everything quite as much as some of the other sites, so we can take kind of a longer look at whether it's Eric Ebron or Ziggy Ansah, some of these guys that are going to be up for free agency, really get into the numbers and sort of how they fit with the roster and where they fit in the NFL and get deeper than maybe we'd otherwise be able to. So, I think that's gotten a good response so far.
You can follow Chris's work on Twitter at Chris Burke NFL. Check out The Athletic/DSP for 20% off savings, and you can support independent writing outlets. Thank you so much for your time. We look forward to catching up with you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, Chris.
Interesting stuff there from Chris. Always enjoy talking to the writers over there at The Athletic. He got a chance to spend time all season, basically as the beat writer for The Athletic, covering the Detroit Lions, and gave us some great, solid information. Yeah, I think the consensus is that when the time comes and Bob Quinn is going to make the announcement, it's going to be Matt Patricia, which basically kind of makes us be patient because everybody thinks that the New England Patriots are going to have a deep run in the postseason as it kicks off. So very interesting stuff. Check out The Athletic. You can get 20% savings through our link when you go to theathletic.com/DSP. We've developed a great relationship with The Athletic and save some money, save 20%.
Yeah, he gave us a lot of great information, and you're right. It looks like it might be Matt Patricia. The one thing I can say about this position, this opening that the Lions have for a head coach, it is, and you can laugh at me if you'd like, but it is probably the absolute best spot to be in if you're looking to be a brand new head coach.
Oh, of course, you got the quarterback, and that's appealing to a lot of people.
That's it right there. You've got a franchise quarterback. We've already talked about how the secondary is really good here, right? You've got a stud left tackle. So you've got pieces to build around, and you've got a decent wide receiving core. On top of all that, you've got $40 million in cap space. You've got an owner who's willing to spend money, and you've got a general manager who has basically come out and basically taken all the onus upon himself. Like, we're going to win. We're going to do whatever it takes to win, and whoever the guy is that's going to be picked, he's going to be picked for a reason because we believe that he can help us get to that next level. So this right here has shaped up to be the number one job in the NFL right now if you're an aspiring head coach.
You said it, cuz it's a fun situation to be in because the Lions basically can go out there and interview a bunch of different people. It's exciting to see who's coming to town, and it represents a new era in Detroit Lion football. The old era is over in terms of seeking just mediocrity. The time is now to go out there and get the coach and take this organization to the next level because in the end, you've invested a lot of money in Matthew Stafford, and that's the key position. You just got to surround him with a little bit more talent and take that next step. And I do believe some playoff success is around the corner. I know it's hard to believe when you listen to this podcast and all the other shows. A lot of people are negative on the Lions. Some people still continue to be Lions free. But when the news was broke, I kind of felt a shot of adrenaline. I mean, it was kind of funny, too, that the Lions pulled out all the razzle-dazzle in a meaningless game versus Green Bay. But in the end, you look at where the Lions are at, and many people do believe if you pick a head coach from the New England Patriots and it's Matt Patricia, a defensive wizard, that there is a chance that this team could take the next step, at least to get to the postseason a little bit more consistently if you add a couple pieces on the defensive line and running back. And if you build that defense, it wins championships, and that's where I've always said in terms of what, remember the Super Bowl with the Denver Broncos? They rode that defense to a title. I think you can do it that way. And if you got the guy, Matthew Stafford, maybe you can even bring in a new offensive staff and still get the same results because it's just football. It's X's and O's, and Stafford could even adjust to new coaches. All right, cuz, we're going to transition after the break to talk about the bowl games. Really, in terms of my vacation, in terms of sports-wise, it was fantastic. And then the new year came, January 1st, got to wake up, watch Michigan football, and then watch real football later on in the day. We'll break it down in terms of Michigan State and Michigan and what the hell happened over the course of the bowl games. Stay with us. You're listening to Doc and Jock. Thanks, everybody, for your continued support. 2018 is here, and we're looking forward to great conversations with great guests like Chris Burke. We're looking forward to great specials. Adam and I will continue to bring the fire each and every Thursday. Thank you for your continued support, finding us across the various platforms. Every single week we check the numbers, and downloads are up, subscribers are up. People seem to be liking the stuff that's coming out of these microphones. It's awesome. The free and easy way to support us, visit our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. You can find out what show airs when. You can click through the Amazon banner, buy any sports tickets. Adam's going to the Detroit Red Wings game soon, and you just click through that ticket banner, and you can find and compare great deals across multiple sites. We greatly appreciate it. We wouldn't be able to keep the microphones hot, the lights on here in the studios without your continued support. Visit DetroitSportsPodcast.com. So, Adam, did the Big Ten go undefeated in the bowl season?
Nope.
No. Who failed to deliver?
Michigan blew their diaper.
The Michigan Wolverines with the choke job after leading 19-3. Let me tell you, man, when you have a vacation, things sometimes, you ideally want to just kind of sit and relax. But in the end, end up doing a lot more than I really wanted to. But part of the experience was watching more sports uninterrupted. Went to the bar to watch Michigan State, and games are still long, but when the games are exciting, when your team is scoring touchdowns and throwing the ball deep, when you see big plays, you're like, this is the greatest sport of all time. So watching the Michigan State Bowl game, the Holiday Bowl, the destruction of Washington State was awesome. 10-win season for Michigan State. And then you got New Year's Day, and you're like, okay, let's peek into Michigan. Let's actually see what Jim Harbaugh did with the 30 days in terms of practice. And you go, 19-3. The offense looked stale in the beginning. They took advantage of some turnovers, but then 19-3 after that, it was a barrage. And in the end, you can really critically look at Michigan and say they beat themselves. Turnovers, key mistakes. I mean, I am not aware in 2018 that the tight end handoff is a thing when there's short yardage situations. And so for me, I boldly said it at WDFN. The coaching situation at Michigan has to be looked at in that Jim Harbaugh is a marketer. But when you look at what's going on the field, a lot of mistakes happen. And when you lose to South Carolina after leading 19-3, you got to point the finger squarely at Jim Harbaugh and say, there were situations in that game that they failed to take advantage of, especially in key moments. And you go, this isn't new. This is continuing to be a trend. And I'll start with this to ask you, has Jim Harbaugh lost his mojo?
I don't know. At this
After
point,
trouble with the snap, a lot of people are saying
I
around the
don't know.
water cooler, has Jim Harbaugh lost his mojo? That's not the same guy that was at Stanford
That's true.
and at San Francisco. It's not the same guy.
The swagger seems to be a little bit diminishing or dimming, if you will. The guy had 30 days, right? He had an entire month to put together a game plan for how they would go out and attack South Carolina. And basically what you got on New Year's Day was what happens when you have a newborn baby and it eats for like the first or second time and it all comes out black and it all goes all the way up their back to basically their hairline or where their hairline would be. That's basically what you got.
Oh, no!
It was atrocious. It was awful.
For the nation to see, New Year's Day, baby, Outback Bowl.
I'll be honest with you. I sat there and I listened to the first half. I was at the gym working out. I had to go get it in, so I was at the gym working out, listening to it on the radio. And listening to it on the radio, it sounded abysmal. And when I got back to my car to leave, you had sent me a message, and I was like, this is brutal. Like, it was awful. It was awful. It was horrendous. And then I go home, and I turn it on to watch it, and I don't even want to watch it. It was so disappointing. Jim Harbaugh was brought here for one reason and one reason alone, and that was to win championships. It was to make Michigan relevant again and to win championships.
Not to lose 5 games in 1 year.
You were supposed to compete with the likes of Ohio State. You were supposed to pound Michigan State. You were supposed to sit there, renew this rivalry with Notre Dame, and you're supposed to go on the road, and you're supposed to embarrass them in South Bend. And you know what? That's not happening next year. With the way this team is constructed right now, that's not happening. And then you got people on Twitter who want to go back and forth, and they want to sit there and protect Jim Harbaugh. What are you protecting? Like, he's a grown-ass man. He's not done a good job. We're now going into year 4 with this guy. Who's our quarterback? Year 4, and you don't have a damn quarterback? Your offensive line. In that game alone, you had like 9 or 10 different offensive line combinations. How are you going to get any consistency when you got 9 or 10 different line combinations going on? No wonder your quarterbacks are getting murdered left, right, and center. You know? Brandon Peters was supposed to be the second coming of Jesus Christ to ever throw a football, right? He was supposed to be like Tom Brady-esque. No, it's not happening. You better sure as hell hope that Shea Patterson can come in here, and you better hope that the NCAA doesn't hold him back, because right now your quarterbacks don't look real good. And I don't want to hear about Dylan McCaffrey. If Dylan McCaffrey was so damn good, why didn't he beat out Peters? Why didn't he beat out the corpse of John O'Corn? Why didn't he beat out Wilton Speight? So I don't want to hear about those guys. You know, what do you have right now? What are you doing right now? Right now, your offensive line's atrocious. Your run game is abysmal. Donovan Peoples-Jones, for as highly recruited as he was and as highly touted as he was, All the guy does is drop footballs and make mistakes. Every single game, he makes a big blunder. I'm not sure if the playbook's a little bit too complex for him, if there's too much going on there, but all the guy does is he bobbles balls and drops them in their own zone. So I'm not sure what he's doing. And I don't want to hear about how Jim Harbaugh's this great recruiter, because those recruits, they're not transitioning onto the field. You see what the guy down the street's doing in Mark D'Antonio, right? The guy goes out and he gets 2- and 3-star kids and turns them into Le'Veon Bell. So I don't want to hear about how this 5-star kid is supposed to be so great, because when he gets here, he's not doing anything but dropping footballs. And we talk about how good this defense is, because that defense is pretty solid. But you know what? The defense has no heart. They've got no soul. They bend and they break. You know? That defense was was part of the reason that you lost that game. Yeah, that offense put you in a bad spot, and your special teams didn't do you any favors. You had a punter who couldn't kick the damn ball, and you had return men who were bobbling and dropping balls. All right? So put your defense in a bad spot. And yeah, they made some big saves and some big stops, but in the end, they sat there and they gave up a bunch of unanswered points.
What has to change going forward in the next couple seasons, for Michigan to kind of get back on track? Because the fans are debating it. People are livid. People are now pointing nationally at Jim Harbaugh. Each and every day, there's a new person calling Jim Harbaugh overrated, and you still got recruiting wars going on with Ohio State and Michigan State, and it looks like the tide has turned, and more people are unfavorably looking at the Michigan program. What has to be different?
You're going to have to figure out who your quarterback is, right? I mean, we talked about this weeks ago. There's a couple ways to win in college football, and one of those ways is to have a really good quarterback. Have a really good quarterback, have a really good defense, or have a really good running back and have a really good defense. You have a really good defense. It needs to find some heart, though. So unless you get your run game going and you've got some type of miraculous running back, like a Joe Mixon from last year, or maybe a Derrick Henry or somebody, you need a good running back, or get your quarterback situation figured out. If it's Shea Patterson, awesome, great, cool. Let's roll. But you better hope the NCAA says thumbs up, because right now it's 50-50 whether he's going to be able to play or not. So that's where you need to start. Once you start there, you then need to look at your coaching staff, and you need to look at your offensive line. Your offensive line coach should be gone, right? You need to figure out what you're doing with that offensive line. Simplify whatever you got going on. Simple protection schemes. That's all you got to do. Keep your quarterback upright. Give him time so he can throw the damn ball down the field. And then as far as your offensive coordinators go, I don't know why you've got so many offensive coordinators. You got a passing coordinator. You got an offensive coordinator. You got a run game coordinator. Why do you have all these guys? You only need one guy. And I don't think it's Pep Hamilton. So get rid of his ass. So figure out what's going on with your quarterback. Address your offensive line. And then adjust your coaching staff. You need to pare it down. Too many voices. Too many voices causes too many problems.
On the flip side, Michigan State, their stock is way up. They got a quarterback, Brian Lewerke, who put on a show versus Washington State. You see the differences in terms of the trends for Michigan State. You see a solid defense. You see LJ Scott, who's like, dude, why would I leave this? This is fun. I'm coming back, baby. I want to come back and see this through. You see a situation with Mark D'Antonio and the passion and the fire that the team came out with versus Washington State. It was amazing. That second quarter was one for the ages. It was a touchdown barrage, deep passes. You see a young wide receiving core that can do some things, and you say, wow, next year the future looks a little bit bright for Michigan State. And when you have that quarterback in Brian Lewerke, tough dude. I mean, he took that hit late in the end zone and came back and allowed Damian Terry to get a little bit of respect and get a touchdown as well. But dude fired back, came right back into the game and did some things. And when you see a guy like Brian Lewerke, the potential is there for him to have a great season. And when you have that quarterback, it makes things look a lot easier for your program. And it's all good for Michigan State right now.
Michigan State's in such a sweet spot right now.
Awesome.
Brian Lewerke looks to be the real deal. He is incredible to watch. Every single game, he gets better and better and better. So good that LJ Scott's like, you know what? I don't want to go make millions next year. I want to come back and I want to play college football. One more year. Let's give it a shot. Let's see if I can hold on to the damn football. So you got LJ Scott coming back. So you've got a senior running back coming back. You got a stud quarterback. Your offensive line looks to be solid. You've got, like you said, a good crop of young wide receivers. That offense should put up a bajillion points next year. That defense, I'm almost certain will be solid. Michigan State might not have an Alabama-esque defense, but they're solid. They're not going to sit there and lose you a game. They'll probably win you a couple. So MSU's in a really good spot. Next year, Michigan's got an uphill battle. Michigan's got to go face Notre Dame, and they got to go and travel to MSU as well as OSU. So good luck if you're a Michigan fan. MSU's in a sweet spot right now. Mark D'Antonio doesn't get enough credit. That guy should be praised from the high heavens because what he did, taking a 3-9 football team and just totally putting a gigantic chip on these kids' shoulders and having them come out every single week and punch dudes in the face till they cry and then take the football and then run it down for a touchdown is unbelievable. The guy has the ability. I think if he was at a different program, and don't take this as an insult and don't take this as any type of shot. I think if he was at a different program, he might have the ability to reach that elite level. You know, it was something we talked about on DFN. Could Mark D'Antonio become an elite head coach? I think he's got such a tough road to go here in the Big Ten because he's surrounded by guys who are mass marketers like Jim Harbaugh, surrounded by good coaches like Urban Meyer. You know, you got James Franklin in Penn State, and they're having a great resurgence here. Wisconsin's a really good team. Mark D'Antonio's got to get through all those guys. And then still, he doesn't get the national respect when it comes time for the big media outlets to sit there and talk about him. They don't even get his name right. Did you hear Shannon Sharp the other day?
It's hard. It is. I know for
he
the national
called him
guys,
Mac. He was like he's like Mac D'Antoni. Like,
yeah.
No, bro.
It's Mark
Not
D'Antonio.
even close.
It is lack of preparation, but I do get it with the Mike D'Antoni, the basketball coach. It's just kind of
fine.
rolls up time.
The last name I get, okay, but get the guy's first name right.
Mac,
Come on,
seriously.
Come on, what are you doing? He deserves all kinds of respect, and he doesn't get it. I think if he was in a different program, if he coached at Florida, I don't know if he'd be able to do the same things. I don't know if the same antics would necessarily work, but if he was able to get through to those guys and really have the impact that he has on Michigan State at, say, like a Florida, he would be considered an elite coach.
Here's what I want to say about that and Mark D'Antonio. The program that he's running is really clean and solid right now. He's kind of cleaned up the issues that have happened in the previous years. Obviously, no football program can be 100% clean. You're going to run into some things. You hope that you learn from your mistakes. But unfortunately, there are times when Michigan State has showed up on the national stage at the college football playoff, and when you get spanked and shut out by Alabama and you look abysmal and you throw interceptions and you don't play good, when you're on the big stage, everyone's watching, that's where the respect is earned, and that's where guys like Dabo Swinney, Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, they get made because when they show up to the big stage, they actually perform. So Michigan State has been to the dance, but unfortunately they didn't belong at the dance. And so that's why we talked about it, in terms of, is Mark D'Antonio elite? Is Michigan State elite? No, they're in that second tier in terms of, hey, it's great to be there. It's not a knock. It's great to be in that kind of second echelon, above mediocre, a team that can get to the Big Ten title game
above
every
Michigan.
now and then. Above Michigan.
Mediocre.
You can win games. You can compete versus Ohio State. You can compete versus Penn State because we watched the Sugar Bowl and the Rose Bowl. Oh, my God, that was a different level.
Oh, my God.
And if you're just looking at that, if you're a Michigan fan, you go, we're supposed to look like that? Michigan would have lost to Oklahoma 80-0 because of the fact they could run the ball, the speed, the passion, the preparation. Georgia had a freshman quarterback out there checking plays and doing some things. A freshman. Remember, Brandon Peters had an audition. You got a guy waiting in the wings to take your job, and you look like that? You look like you were unprepared, throwing interceptions. So you look at what's going on in the SEC, and you look at the Big Ten. The Big Ten won, a lot of bowl games. They only lost one. But the way you look at it is when you compare the Big Ten to the SEC at the top, you got a lot of work to do. It's hard.
And the
because
Big Ten lost to the SEC.
The talent is in the SEC. The elite talent is at Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, Georgia. It's really tough to compete year in, year out when you got all the recruiting in the South going on and they go to the teams in the SEC. So in terms of becoming elite, the only way that word will ever come to Mark D'Antonio and the Michigan State program is get to the playoff, win it, and hoist that trophy. Then we're talking about some rarefied air. If you take Michigan State in the Big Ten and you win the college football playoff in this incarnation, oh my God, you're going to start talking about him in the likes of Bear Bryant, in the likes of Nick Saban, because it's that hard. I really believe it.
I don't think you'll talk about him like that, but
Dude,
I get what you're saying.
When you go 3-9 and you get 10 wins the next year, that's a fast turnaround.
That's impressive.
People talked about him being the national coach of the year, so I give him respect. But yeah, in terms of where the program's at, it's an above-average team in the Big Ten that can compete with a quarterback now next year. If you can retool it and some of these guys hit, you might have a conversation about getting back to that playoff. You never know. But like we said on the radio, It's really tough, man, because of the fact the Big Ten is brutal. Going through the East is just Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, year in, year out. And then if you play Wisconsin every now and then, Iowa, Northwestern, it is unbelievably tough to get through that Big Ten with one loss at most. Get the hell out of here, man. It's too tough. But you got to give Mark D'Antonio credit. The way that he prepared those 30 days, his guys weren't partying, making videos for content for a website, man. That was atrocious all the way around. Bad, unbelievably disappointing for the Michigan program. I'm sorry you guys had to watch it. It went nationwide, baby. Sorry.
It was a tough watch. It was absolutely brutal.
Great start to 2018. Great guest, Chris Burke, talking Lions. It's looking now that the Detroit Lions are going to do a thorough search for their coach. It's a new era, and, can you believe that Jim Caldwell was the coach throughout the entire run of our 230 episodes? You believe that? He was the Lions head coach. It's unbelievable. And now you're looking at a new situation, a new coach, and Michigan State, they're trending in different directions. And like I said, I'm happy with how it's going. I'm sorry for Michigan fans, but as it looks right now, Michigan State's the team to beat in the state of Michigan. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Michigan's got an uphill battle to go, and I don't know. I'm not really sure where we go with Detroit sports at this point. I mean, thank God Jim Caldwell's out of here and Bob Quinn seems to know what the hell he's doing because
it's a new year.
Everybody else seems lost. The other general managers
it's looking like
boners.
It's looking like our satisfaction will come from the college game. That's where it's going to be.
Well, your satisfaction will.
Yeah.
I'm going to be upset.
For the Jock, Adam Strozinski, I am the Doc, John McAroon. Thank you so much for finding us. Check out all our podcasts, DetroitSportsPodcast.com.
Go Red Wings-ish? It might even be Mike Vrabel. Vrabel?
Vrabel. It might be Mike Vrabel.
Vrabel? I can't say because I'm missing my tooth.
Vrabel.
Vrabel?
Yeah.
Vrabel.
This was locker room talk.
Second dick. Sorry, Detroit. Didn't quite work out.
And all I can say is Detroit Sports Podcast scores.
I hear voices in my head. They counsel me. They understand. They talk to me. They talk to me.